So Vikram now.
Mr. Speaker, the bankruptcy regime is one that balances many competing interests. On the one hand, it tries to protect creditors by ensuring that the assets of a bankrupt can be properly accounted for, realized and distributed in a fair way to all creditors. This prevents creditors feeling pressurized to act unilaterally or act faster than the others. Counterintuitively, it also protects the interests of bankrupts themselves by taking away the stress and pressure of having to deal with a larger number of creditors, and allows them to continue working, earning a salary, and meeting their basic living requirements, while ensuring that contributions are also made towards the payment of their debts. Finally, and importantly, a bankruptcy also protects third parties dealing with the bankrupt, as they will then be able to make appropriate precautions when extending credit or entering into transactions, because the fact of bankruptcy is a public matter that anyone dealing with a person would be able to check. Now, in facilitating the administration of a bankruptcy, it's usually helpful to have a professional, often it's an accountant, involved, as this will ensure an orderly realization and distribution of assets of the bankrupt. The professional should be disinterested and act impartially as between debtor and creditors. Where a professional is not appointed, the default would be for the official assignee to administer the estate of a bankrupt. The OA has historically administered a large number of bankruptcies, and I think the figures revealed by the Minister were 99% originally and 60% presently. And this would be, I believe, especially the case where the assets of the estate are small and the debts are small. Now, this has naturally resulted in a heavy caseload for the OA's office as well. In that sense, I can see where this legislation is coming from. It is creating as a default that the PTIB will administer all bankruptcies, and the burden is on the applicant applying for the bankruptcy to identify the professional before the application can be made. Now, this will have the dual benefits of having a professional administering all bankruptcies by the sounds of it, except for the few where public interest is triggered, while at the same time reducing the burden on the OA. The only concern I have with this proposal is whether it would mean that those with smaller claims and estates would no longer be able to avail themselves of the protections afforded by bankruptcy. The main downside of requiring a PTIB to be appointed for each bankruptcy is that it may be difficult to find professionals who are prepared to administer smaller estates at an economic price, particularly where the applicant is the bankrupt himself. If we take a classic example of a small estate, a person without any substantial assets, the estate itself may still take some time to administer, so there is a risk that the professional who is doing this will be liable for the costs in the meantime. There are also considerable benefits for a person with a small amount of debt to be offered the protection offered by bankruptcy, such as the moratorium against actions and avoiding the stress of having multiple creditors following him. His creditors would also be protected by knowing that they will be dealt with equitably, rather than each one feeling pressurized to take their own enforcement action if the bankruptcy is deemed to be uneconomic. Finally, third parties dealing with persons who have financial issues who are not made bankrupt may not know that this person has financial issues, and they would then be at risk of dealing with someone who is in substance insolvent but may not have been made a bankrupt because there was no PTIB found was able to act. Now, this problem may be particularly acute for those who have, for example, gone into the cycle of debt, starting with consumer credit, taking on more credit, say, from licensed money lenders at high interest rates to pay off earlier debts. This borrowing to repay old debts generally leads to ballooning debts, which are detrimental to both borrowers and lenders. So I'll be grateful if the Minister can share whether there are any safeguards, particularly for those cases where the PTIBs may not be willing to take up an appointment, to ensure that those who otherwise qualify for bankruptcy will still be able to take out the appropriate applications. Thank you.